All right. And the good news is if we need to like edit anything, we can. So
Sure.
I'm going to try not to fuck this up, but I make no promises.
Well, yeah, it'd be great.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Savage Gentleman podcast. Today, we have with us none other than the Bert Sorin, MF CEO of Sorinex, and among with many other talents and skills. And Bert, super glad to have you. I can't believe it's taken this long to actually get you on this thing.
Thanks a lot for having me on, man. It's cool. We got to connect and bond. Well, a couple of years ago now, and was it Utah?
Yeah, we were down in Moab.
Moab, yeah, and had some awesome conversations and talked about making snow caves and all the cool stuff. Took a front squat workout together, and now we get to talk finally.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. And for those of you who don't know, Bert is really awesome individual. If you haven't been following the stuff that he gets into, I highly recommend, especially if you're into hunting and family and fitness and epic badass beards. I hope I'm not shortchanging you any there. There's probably a laundry list of other things, but just right off the top of my head, those are some of the highlights. And it's interesting. Bert's the kind of guy that, man, you just start talking and within a few minutes, you really cut through the bullshit and you get into some cool stuff. And that's something that I really appreciate. And I'm fortunate to have, a guy like you and other individuals as well in the orbit that you can just have these really, man, deep, profound conversations with. I think it's a rare thing these days, unfortunately.
Thank you. Likewise. Those are definitely the type of people I'm attracted to as well. And so that's why I think we hit it off. I think we were in a minivan or something riding through the desert, figuring out what we're trying to do, figuring out if we want to wear our new boots or our old boots on the hike. And that's the stuff, man. Like you realize, hey, this person has some more depth behind him. And yeah, we both have beards and muscles and all that stuff. And like, it better go further than that. And that was, the cool part was we didn't talk about any of that normal stuff that you would see on the surface. And I appreciate you too. And likewise, it's been too long since we've got to talk, and we needed to do this a long time ago.
Indeed. And I guess I left off the list male model.
I guess the same shoot.
Well, everyone knows I'm a model, but they may not know that you are.
We share the same green room,
Yeah, that's right.
Speaking of which, Rudy Reyes is at my house right now.
What?
Yeah, weird. Yeah, he hit me yesterday or the day before. He said he and Jade are coming through town. They wanted to use the farm for a shoot on shooting. So they brought their guns over. They're running the range, and then they're coming over tonight for dinner. So they're
holy shit, dude! I've got so much FOMO right now. Son of a gun. And I mean, speaking of male models, Rudy Reyes.
Yeah, Rudy was like the OG.
He's kind of the guy.
Guy. Yeah. So he very well may just like strangely pop into this podcast because his entry is always very dynamic and flamboyant. So we may get a Rudy cameo like in the middle of this.
One can only hope. That would be fantastic. He's another one that I need to get on here as well at some point. I mean, that guy's got an amazing story. And speaking of story, I guess maybe we should give a little bit of backstory on, we've kind of alluded to how we met. But for the listeners, they probably have no idea what the hell we're talking about. So they're like, all right, nice. So Bert and I met on a photo shoot for Beyond Clothing. We're good buddies with the guys that run that company, Rick and Paul got us involved in that. And this was several years ago, and they make, really cool outdoor adventure gear. And we like to do outdoor adventuring stuff. And apparently we look good enough to take pictures of in some people's minds. So we got to go down to Moab and stomp around and, look like we were doing epic stuff. And actually it turned into being epic stuff, which is really cool and something, that I know you're really cognizant of. And I try to be as well, of not just like trying to look the part, but actually like, walking the walk. And so, when you're talking about doing outdoors adventure, man, I don't know that there's many things that you haven't done. I mean, you've been on a bunch of hunts so far this year, right?
I have. It's been a pretty good year.
I was going to say, judging from what I've seen online, it's been pretty successful. You got a monster whitetail recently, right?
Yeah, I've been on a bunch of hunts this year, and I was on a little bit of a slump for my destination style hunts. I've been on mule deer in northern Arizona or the deserts of Arizona, mule deer archery hunt, and got really close a few times. I actually had a miss. It's public land mule deer hunt, spot and stalk. It's pretty tough, but and then I had a 2-day elk hunt. So unfortunately, I passed up some bulls that I should have shot. I hunted it like it was a 5-day hunt, and it was a 2-day hunt. And then you realize, like, oh crap, yeah, we're here now. Yeah, I had a crazy 9 days. I shot a monster here in South Carolina, whitetail. Went to Missouri 2 days out before the end of the bow season. Shot a giant with my bow, and then the second day of the rifle season, shot even a bigger one with my rifle out of the same stand. So it's kind of like, remember like on Caddyshack when like the priest the reverend just keeps knocking in no matter where he hits the ball, it just it just goes the hole. Yeah, so that was kind of the 9 days I had there. So it was good because I had a little bit of a slump. So
yeah, dude, that's
averages out.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, and I suppose that's the way it goes. I mean, I'm just like dipping my toe in the hunting water. I mean, nothing too crazy. For the folks that may have been following my antics recently, I've been I've taken no, I mean it's borderline shenanigans. Even I've got a recurve bow that I've been practicing for several months now. I got it restrung over the summer, and I've just been, thumping a target, and I've gained enough confidence to at least go out and try and bag some squirrels in the land back behind me. And I'm not super good at all. I haven't gotten any yet. I mean, the squirrels are, that squirrely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're trying, like they call it. Yeah, I'm sure the traditional archery they call the struggle stick, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So you're starting with the struggle stick. Like you're not starting with a rifle or a crossbow or a compound bow or a shotgun. Like, yeah, no, I just want to get a stick and a string and walk out there and see what we could do. Like, mostly this is like for psychotic experts, but why not start with that? That makes total sense.
I mean, I think I have the psychotic part down. But it's interesting, something that you were talking about on your hunt, and I can somewhat relate to, again, in my limited hunting experience, is this idea of like passing up shots. And I think that that's probably something that translates in a bigger sense. And I wanted to kind of get your take on, man, okay, you see these opportunities and it's the do I, don't I moment, right? And it's like, well, especially if you have a limited number of tags, you can't just keep trading up. It's not like you're fishing and you can cull and you're like, oh, just kidding, let me throw this one back because I caught a bigger one. It's like you get what you get. And man, how do you process that moment of like, okay, this potentially could be all I get. It could be a good one, or the biggest freaking trophy bull could be walking right by in a matter of seconds.
Right. Now that's something, see, growing up in South Carolina, we've had super liberal limits. For a while, when I grew up, South Carolina was $2 per day for 4 months in South Carolina. So the having to call or having to choose was a pretty limited experience. So like like, if you had bullets in a shot, you're like, here we go, like
here's another one. Yeah.
So you get a lot of reps. It's like a video game. You just get a lot of reps if you want it. So that was good in one way because you get a lot of reps, at reps as in like you get to shoot and you get to blood trail and you get to make decisions and all that other stuff. But when you go to a different state that you've waited 3 or 4 or 5 years to get a tag, you're there, you've spent a lot of money on like the guide or whatever, the housing, all that other stuff. And you have this one tag. And then that's where, a lot of those guys say, don't pass the first day, which you would shoot the last day. And yeah, it sounds good, but it's always a gamble, right? Most people hunt, not because they're only hungry, but there's some sort of romanticism or some sort of adventure or kind of an expectation, but you're just thinking like, I'm going to do this awesome thing, right? And so for me, like, I'll be honest, just stuff with big stuff on their head makes me excited. Like when it's like kind of like muscles, like big muscles are cooler than little muscles. Like when you go up and you wrap your hand around this big piece of bone off this just ancient, cool animal, like there's something primal in it.
Oh yeah.
So, and generally there are less of them. There's a scarcity to it, and they're older. So they're smarter. It's just a harder deal. So it's actually the reverse of predatory response or predatory action within nature, because in nature you go after the weakest and easiest to kill with the least amount of effort towards it.
Yeah,
because why would you put a lot of effort towards making a living? And but with like I hate to say a trophy hunter, but going after the more mature intelligent animals, I'll pass hundreds of whitetails a year to shoot the one I'm looking for. But going into that, you realize I could eat a tag this year. So every time you pass, you're going, hey, I'm maybe
running a risk.
I'm one step closer to success, or I'm one step further away from success every time. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, so with that context, because, like I mentioned before, you're the head honcho over at Sorin, and so, how does that same mentality apply to running a business? Because I imagine, there's a lot of decisions that come across your desk that are like, all right, is this the opportunity? If I take this one, does it preclude me from something else? Do I pursue this?
That's a great
bird in the hand.
That's a great way to put it. So I'll give you the story that actually happened this year in the woods, and then kind of Tarantino it into kind of the business. So nice. I killed those two big deer last week in Missouri. So I killed one that was like, what I kind of figured was around just big, whatever. Great. Well, I sat the same stand for 2 more days, and I kept seeing these smaller bucks, good bucks that you would certainly shoot, but I'd already killed a big one. And the time was going, and I was seeing less and less deer. Well, the pressure, the pressure is happening. Every time you hear a shot, somewhat that's one less deer in the inventory. So you look at it from a business perspective, you're like, that's one less business opportunity out there. That's one less draft pick out there.
Yep.
Every time you hear a shot. And then also, not only is that one dead probably, but the ones around them are more educated. The market is more saturated. Like that's how you kind of look at that.
Yeah.
And so I get to the point where I'm seeing these younger bucks run around and chasing and breeding these does. And so immediately you think like, well, the market's saturated. Like what is out here is out here. And this is what I need to probably shoot one of these okay opportunity deer, because the big ones are gone, or I killed the big one and all that other stuff. But then you take one deep step further to a trained eye. And I went, wait a minute. The buck I killed had a big scar on his head, and his ribs, the fascia under the fascia was bruised yellow. I go, those little deer didn't do that to this one.
Yeah.
So then you have that's that little bit of that market intuition and wisdom. You go, there's still an opportunity out there that is uncovered right now. There's still white space.
Yeah.
And I said, a big one isn't going to let these little guys breed in this little area. And the more pressure that happens, just like in the market, the more pressure that happens, it pushes the deer in this space into the thick forest where I was staying. I was going to the hardest place to be because I knew when the pressure happened, the deer would run to me. And they
hardest for hunters to get to, or hardest for the deer to access as well?
The deer love it, but it's hardest for the hunters to get to. You got to walk far. It's thick. It's nasty. You can't see very far. It's not the fun place to be, i.e. the easy part of the marketplace.
Right.
So I went in and did the work. I holed up there knowing that basically the market would come to me if I did a good job.
Yep.
And the more shots I kept hearing, the more deer I started seeing pile into that little forest where I was, because they were trying to get out of Dodge, and I happened to be in their bedroom. And day 2, I saw an absolute monster stand up out of his thick bed, and he'd been there all morning watching everything that was going on. And I just stayed tight, and I was able to kill him. And he was considerably bigger. I was pretty sure he was the one that was beating up on the giant that I was shot a few days before. But I remember at one point that day going, man, the next decent one that comes by, I'm taking, because, industry, the inventory is getting low. I better get it while it's
ticking. Yeah.
Right. And so you're exactly right. That's things that happen in business. it's always playing that double dutch. When do you jump in? Right.
Mhm.
Well, it's like stock market. Hey, what is it going up? Is it going down? Where am I at? What's the white space currently in the industry? What are the trends? What are the competitors doing? Oh, they didn't see this. That's the fun part of it, right? I mean, that's the cool stuff that makes hunting fun, makes business fun, all that other stuff. Sitting on a food plot and having a deer walk out, that's pretty easy. But having to really outsmart the whole situation, that's the stuff and when it pays off, I've killed a couple hundred deer in my life. I've been hunting for 30 something years, and to kill my number 2 and my number 3 all time within 4 days of each other,
it's pretty gnarly.
It's pretty gnarly. It's one of those you're like, well, there went my life for about 5 years. I probably just better take up golf at this point.
Yeah, so, no kidding. Well, but that's, that is
parallel that I see it.
Yeah, no, that is true hunting, right? Otherwise, you're kind of just shooting. You know what I mean? There's a point where you can kind of gamify it enough, I would imagine, that it's, and this isn't to like bash anyone and how they hunt or that sort of thing, because there's a lot of people that truly use that meat to survive. That is how they feed their families. And when that's the case, man, it's by any means necessary. I don't give a shit what it takes. I don't care what you need to do, get it done. But when you're talking about
and get it done as quickly and as efficiently as possible, because if it's for survival, you want a low overhead.
Right. Yep. You can't spend, months and months sitting in a stand waiting for that one opportunity. Get in, get out, and get it done. But the strategy, the outsmarting, the thinking, the craftiness, to me, that is a really compelling component to hunting in general that I think is really cool. And like I said, I'm still trying to, put one over on these squirrels that have been just giving me the business as of late. But it is fun, man. You're studying the animal. You're like, you're trying to strategize. I'm looking at what time of day I need to be going out. When are they most active? Actually, yesterday I went for a jog down the road, and it just occurred. I was like, damn, there's a lot of squirrels running around. And then I was like, wait, if there's squirrels here out by the road, guarantee they're going to be running around out there in the woods. Yeah. Weird. Right. So noticing that, I was like, and sure enough, I saw a ton of them. Most of them were in the trees, and I don't have the right tips to be confident to just look. I just didn't want to lose arrows,
Right.
So I've got to get better, and I got to get a little bit better equipment, but recognizing patterns, I think, is really important. And, both in business and in actual hunting. For you, how much, obviously there is the recognition, the pattern, the studying, the cleverness. How much do you personally tend to rely on kind of that intuition, right? That instinct of, no, this is the path to go. Because you said you had some, like an actual business tie-in that this would relate to. There's something that happened that you specifically did.
Well, yeah, and it's more of a day in and day out as we look at the industry. So like I use a lot of technology and metrics in both business and hunting. Like almost every day I wake up, the first thing I do is check the wind and all the places I hunt, whether I'm hunting or not. I check the weather, I check the moon phase, I check the wind. And so I start establishing patterns. And then I go through the motions and go, okay, if I'm going to sit this thicket today, my ingress and egress needs to be this way to not alert the deer. The thermals are going to push my scent up. And for me, it's just part of keeping my mind working and to think, oh, my wind switch from north to south, that's unhuntable now. Or I might have a sneaky thing I could do to come up and around and do something differently. And so for me, that's almost just like, it's like medicinal dessert for my brain. I like doing it, but it just teaches me to be smarter and sharper and to start predicting outcomes based on some of the algorithms and some of my technology. And then much like with business, right? You start looking at, okay, well, these are the things trending. These are the things, I see some white space here, or I see some, different profit losses, like all that type of thing. Use those big tools, the technology tools that we have. But then sometimes, I like what they call still hunting, which means, strangely enough, you're not even being that still. You're walking through you're just literally walking through the woods.
Yep.
And you're walking super slow. And I like it because you have to be so in tune to what you're doing. There's no off time. If you're sitting in a stand, you kind of turn off your brain a little bit and just observe. But in still hunting, because you're actually hunting, you have to be remarkably present at the time, and you work a lot off of there's logic in that part, but there's sometimes just gut. Like, I just need to walk fast right now. I need to be over the side of that ridge right now. I don't know why. I just feel like I do.
Yeah.
And that's the fun part when you kind of work in that rarefied air, even in business. A lot of times, I'll think of things in the business world, whether it be like a design of something, it'll be that last little bit right before you wake up, when you're still in that REM sleep.
Yep.
You're coming out of deep, you're kind of in REM, you're kind of awake, you're kind of not. And I've dreamt of so many different pieces of equipment or movement characteristics or ways to solve something right in that spot. And there's no technology involved in that. That's just the computer of your brain running, and you wake up, you're like, oh yeah, that's that. And then you run off that intuition, like, I don't know, this just feels right doing it this way. But you have to be connected to that, much like when you're in the woods, you can't kind of be there.
Yeah.
You have to be super there. I would say, like in a fight, like you can't be thinking about what's going on at home. Like
you can. No, I mean, you can, it just doesn't go well. I can tell you firsthand that the net result, I mean, I spent about 25 minutes of just getting my ass handed to me. It was right after my daughter was born. And my wife had just gone back to work on maternity leave. So we're talking, what is that? Probably three months roughly.
Right.
So 3 months. The week that my wife went back to work was my first week being stay-at-home dad, taking care of the baby, which was also fight week. So I'm cutting weight. I've got our first child that I'm like, I don't know what to do with this thing, and I hope I don't break it. And so yeah, needless to say, like the fight that put an interesting spin on fight camp. Making weight was super tough, and I get out there and just, man, as much as I was trying to rally and muster, it just wasn't there. And I guess I'm too dumb and too stubborn to quit. So I just let that guy beat my ass for like 25 minutes straight, and every round I'd come back, and my coach, Jeremy Horn, he's like, all right, man, you got to start doing stuff. I'm like, yeah, no, I hear you. And I super want to, but my body's just like, yeah, no, fuck you. We're not doing that today, boss. So,
right.
So man, it's super important.
Yeah, just to be remarkably present. And you could use all the tech, the planning and all the stuff of fight camp and all that other stuff. But when you're in the fight, like, you have to be there.
It's amazing how little some of that other stuff matters when it comes down to it, right? I mean, and this isn't to say you can go out there and have success on wing or prayer. The preparation isn't important, right? But all of that preparation will fall flat on its face if you can't bring it together when it counts, and I think that's what's really cool about hunting, right? Again, you can sit and you can sling all the arrows in the world, and you can put them on a freaking dime, from 50 yards out. But if you can't do it when it actually counts, when the pressure is on, it doesn't matter.
Right. Or make those little, like for a boast, you're going to be within 20, 30, 40, 50 yards at most. Well, also people forget a rifle, you could sit there on the gun and wait for that animal to show up and squeeze off, like that much movement. Right. There's also a physical component of drawing. There's this big gross motor pattern movement. And then if the animal decides to stand behind a tree for 4 minutes, well, you're at full draw. And so there's another thing. And then, okay, now you're letting down this bow and having to do it. Like, there's all this other stuff. So you have to be really, really dialed in, because kind of like in business, like when you got to shoot your shot, it has to be, you don't get too many opportunities.
You damn sure better be ready for it. Yeah.
You better be ready for it. You better time it right.
Yeah. I mean, I like what you were talking about with that sixth sense, that intuition. And I think we spoke about this on the phone earlier, this idea of like sensitivity, where, man, we really, I think, have gotten away from being able to listen to our instincts, that gut feeling, and a lot of that comes from sensitivity. Everything we tend to take in this world today comes from our eyes. It's a visual stimulus. And yeah, there's a lot of information there, but your body, you have a nervous system. It's not just one input, right? And there's so much that I think that we don't even really fully understand. And when you look at animals, right, and the way they behave and the things that they can do, and they're smelling stuff, they're hearing stuff, but I think that there's something else that they just feel and they intuit that, this human creature that we are has I think lost touch of for a lot of folks.
Well, I think we've been at the top of the food chain so long, we've kind of become a proactive organic system versus reactive. And not to say that that's bad or good, but for a survival standpoint, you kind of need to be reactive. You need to know, like, you need to be an information processing system, not just an output. I'm just going to do these things. Well,
right.
You need to do these things based on the information coming in.
Yeah.
And if you're not sensitive to that in all senses, and even a sixth sense, and just a gut feeling of something, you could get smoked.
Oh yeah.
And in the olden days, like the days before we were just apex predators living in, high rises and the whole deal, you got super smoked because before, like, we got good with tools and weapons, we're pretty vulnerable little chappies running around.
Yeah, no, I mean, we really don't have much going for us. I mean, we're a tasty treat for a saber-toothed cat.
Yeah, no fur,
literally
no
nothing.
Claws.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder, like, how more in tune people were sense-wise,
right?
I guarantee 100 years ago.
I think very much so. And again, I think a big part of it is, like you said, we don't have to be anymore. And I think another part is information overload. We're bombarded with so much data now and so much stimulus that, it's really hard to be sensitive and pick up on a signal when all you get is static.
Yeah,
it's just nonstop bombardment of sound and light and color and information from every angle. You're overstimulated, I think. And when you're overstimulated, you can't be sensitive to the really minute things that might be, coming your way.
Oh, it's scientifically proven. I mean, that you build a tolerance to input, right? I mean, you probably got hurt the first few times you got punched, and after a while, it's like, that guy keeps swinging, and I keep feeling some stuff, and like,
yeah, you feel
punch me, I'm like, hey, this sucks.
Whoa. Well, yeah, it's funny because you feel like your body being moved, like you feel the force that it changes your trajectory a little bit, but the pain doesn't really register unless something gets really messed up. Like you cave in your orbital socket, you're going to feel that, you know what I mean? You completely obliterate your nose. You'll probably feel that. Have a tooth come out. Yeah. But as far as the other stuff, a black eye, even a laceration, it doesn't actually hurt. You're just like, oh, there's some wet stuff coming out me. And then it's like, shit. Well, but you're not like, there's never a time. I don't think there's ever been a single case where I'm just like, ooh, owie, that's smart.
I got an ouchie.
I got an owie. Yeah. Hey.
Yeah, and it's weird. And it happens quickly too, because I hunted for a week in Missouri. We're hunting 12 hours a day. We're on stand. Oof. It's the rut. So you get there and you're not moving for 12 hours. You have a hike in, hike out, but literally, you get back to camp, you talk a little bit. But I started thinking about it. I said, I went for a week and basically didn't hear any sounds. Like, I didn't watch TV. I didn't listen to music. I had a few conversations, and my ears actually hurt this week because everything sounds so loud.
Wow.
It's weird. Like, when people talk, I'm like, gosh, why are you being so loud? They're like, my kids, I thought my head was going to blow off when I came home because they're all screaming and freaking out. And I'm like, what is wrong with these people? They're like, it's just normal. I'm like, oh, right. I've been in basically audio confinement for a week, and now I'm like super wolf man. I could hear everything.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I actually had forgotten what it was like to assimilate back to society. We were out on the TV show, and we were out in the wilderness for like 21 days on that Discovery Channel thing. And coming back, it was like borderline disturbing, kind of like what you were saying. It was like such a shock to just have so much going on, machines and TV and light and everything. It was like, we had people there, so it wasn't solitude. But again, you're sleeping in the dirt every single night. You're not being exposed to all of the technology and that sort of thing. And so getting immediately thrust back into it, there was no like gradual thing. When they stopped filming and we made it to the end, there was like, all right, now you're back in the world again. Go hop on a plane and fly to Japan. And it made your head spin. It's interesting, how, but it's cool that we can also adapt in the other direction. Right. So yeah, we've become adapted and I think somewhat numb and lost that sensitivity because of the overload of information. But man, if you start to remove that and you can consistently do it for a bit of time, I mean, humans are incredibly adaptable species. And I think we sometimes forget that. It's like, yeah, I know we're kind of a shitty animal in the way that we steward the planet and the way that we treat each other. But also, man, we're pretty remarkable in a lot of ways if we can kind of not step on our own dicks, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, that's really accurate. I mean, we are pretty much like, back to back planet champions. Like we've kind of figured this place out.
We're crushing it, literally to death.
We're crushing it. We won.
Yeah.
But no, you're exactly right. And that's part of like a Sorin X Outdoors. Like we want to get, I'm not trying to like plug that.
No, please do. I mean, I plug as much.
That's kind of what we're trying to do is like get people out of, and I love sports and I was an athlete in the whole nine. It's like, but that doesn't always have to be the end goal of exercise or you're like, hey, you're a college soccer player, whatever. Like you don't have to play soccer for the rest of your life to be active.
Yeah,
you can if you want, but there's also all these other outdoor pursuits and rock climbing and scuba diving and hunting and all these other things, and a more of a capable subsistence style that starts sharpening these senses, these different senses. And that's kind of what my excitement level has been, because I threw a steel ball for 20 years. I was really good at making it go far. I paid for my school. That got me on a couple Olympic trials and like all that other stuff, but I don't do that anymore. I'm 45 years old. I'm not going to try to throw a hammer. But I was able to still train and to hold myself accountable and to live a strenuous lifestyle through a different medium, and a medium that I really loved as a child and as an adolescent and a young adult, but I just didn't get to do it enough. So that's kind of like a Sorin X Outdoors side comes in.
Yeah, I think that's so awesome and really useful. Now, I think we can get fixated on a particular thing, right? And when we look at like sport and athletics as the end all be all, as opposed to just like a means to an end, right? Like the sport itself, it was really designed to simulate something bigger, that had a higher purpose, right? I mean, even something like fighting, that's kind of useful for self-defense. And, if I had to go and, I don't know, go in war with another tribe or whatever, it's like, I'd probably be pretty handy if everyone ran out of weapons and all we were left to with their bare hands. Like, you want me? Yeah, I'll do. So, but I mean, something like the game of American football, right? And it's like, well, that if you take a lot of the tenets, not that this was the origin, I'm just using that as an example. There's kind of like a bigger picture of like battle there. And you look at a bunch of the Olympic sports, right? You look at the javelin throw. Well, they were actually throwing spears. You look at the pommel horse and gymnastics, and they were jumping on the ass of a horse. And these are all actually requisite skills for a greater purpose, the survival of the species. Then we just got comfortable enough to actually dick around with it and explore it to this point where we can just do it for funsies now. Like, I don't really need to shoot a bow and arrow at anybody, but I'm gonna be the best at the world at it, not because we need to war with these other tribes and use this thing, but because it's fun and it's cool and I can go to the Olympics and get a sponsorship from it. So I think that perspective is huge, right? Of like, hey man, you don't have to define yourself by this activity. It's really valuable. I mean, you wouldn't be the man that you are today had you not, competed at that level and gone through the process. Right. But I think it's the process that matters, not the actual activity or the awards or the other stuff itself.
Of course. And it checks boxes. You hate to say, like, we're so primal in so many ways as just humans, like a savage gentleman, right? Like you have these, or you look at and you go, well, yeah, like we're not throwing spears at each other right now, but we're kind of going to flex on each other, and we're all going to bring our best out to this field, and we're going to basically show the guy who could be the best at throwing a spear at you.
Just so you know,
if we wanted to fight, we got this guy.
Yeah.
and you're like, it's kind of the same thing, just a little bit turned down. Like
I don't know. If we hadn't cleaned house at the Olympics, I might argue with you. But since we had such a great showing, I'm like, no, let's use the Olympics. Let's use athletic competition as a proxy for
sure.
And I'm thankful that we actually live in a time period where that's the case. I mean, I know there's a lot of guys like, man, I was born in the wrong era. I should have been a freaking Viking warrior. And it's like, yeah, I get that. And I like listening to, freaking Danheim and Heilong and that sort of shit too. Like it's pretty rad. But man, I wouldn't, if I'm being truly honest, man, the prospect of having to just jump on a freaking ship and sail out into the unknown with nothing but my
for months,
fur and battle axe and just see what we find and hope I can, bring back some silver and whatever the hell else I'm looking for. Yeah, it would be cool for like,
everybody wants to be a Viking until do Viking shit.
Yeah, it would be super cool until you get your arm hacked off and you're like, fuck. Now, that this really sucks.
Yeah, and there's no penicillin or anything. I'm like, I'm gonna die 3 weeks from now.
They're like, I'm gonna bleed out right here because you watch
or
movies,
get infected or tetanus or all these other things, and you're like, yeah, you see me awesome being a Viking today. Like 3 weeks from now when I still got to do this shit.
Yeah, this sucks. Damn it. Okay. Well, I mean, and that's like the epic stuff. I mean, imagine you just accidentally drink some shitty water and you get freaking cholera or you know what I mean? You just get food poisoning and die because you shit yourself to death.
It's like he was doing good a couple of days and then he just up and died.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't. It's like, yeah, I get it. Like Viking stuff is super cool and bygone era. I think there's a lot of value in that, but also, man, there's some positive sides to modern medicine and technology. I think, and again, bringing back the savage gentleman mentality, it's like, well, let's take the best of both. Let's not cast aside, the valuable aspects of primitive man, because I think that they're in a lot of ways, our primitive ancestors were better than us at certain things. And I think we can borrow and lean on a lot of those aspects to enrich our own modern lives. But also, man, I'm talking to you from several hundred miles away, having a conversation that I'd have to, get on a horse and ride for a couple of months.
We would have to meet at the rendezvous in springtime.
Yeah. And hope for the best.
Get in our knife fight.
Yeah. And I probably would starve to death before we even got there. Cause like I said, I haven't even gotten the first freaking squirrel. So, just going to waste away to nothing.
Yeah. That's very interesting to look at. Cause I grew up too, like just thinking Vikings were so cool. And I still think they're amazing. I think they're more amazing now that there were actually any Vikings. Cause you had to be tougher than crap just to survive that style. Like you eat rotten fish and go around on this boat with it, like you said, well, at least my axe will keep me warm. What are you talking about?
Be like, bro, have you ever been to Norway? You know what I mean? Like it's cold up there all the time.
Just and you got some weird fur and like no Gore-Tex, no underlayers, like no real good shoes. It's like I killed a bunch of crap and I wrapped it around me, and let's paddle this boat for a couple hundred miles.
Oh man,
and maybe the French guys aren't as tough as we are.
Yeah, no. Let's go find some other sissies that maybe.
Could you imagine how pissed off you would be when you got to shore though? You're like, fuck this boat, man. This boat sucks. I am killing the shit out of the first person I see and taking their stuff.
Maybe that was the strategy, right? Where you're just like, all right, man, we're just going to be so freaking miserable that no one can stop us, because literally anything is better than what I just experienced.
That's probably it, right? Like you keep, I remember going to Westside Barbell my first time, like in 2002. I remember Louis said, he's like, "Oh yeah, there's fights in here all the time." I was like fights. He's like, fights. And you like figure like, you know, they don't make any, you know, any question that they're using some different, you know, substances.
Yeah. And getting some extra help on the
strongest
side.
Yeah, you got some strongest dudes ever on a bunch of stimulants and strong making pills.
Yep.
And
that also incidentally affect your temper and mood and aggression.
and everyone's mad.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what happens? They're like, oh, well, they start fighting. We literally, if they're on the ground, we'll just kick them across the ground out of the door to get them out of the way of the squat rack, and we'll keep squatting. And you're just like, oh, okay. So like they can kill each other in the parking lot and probably would try.
Yeah.
But as long as they're not getting in the way and messing up the tempo of box squats that day, get out of the way.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I wonder why you guys were so good for so long, because you're a bunch of freaking animals. Like,
yeah. It has, I mean, you know, pure unadulterated savagery does have some advantages depending on what your goals and objectives are. And I think, you know, the key is being able to call upon that and tap into it when it's necessary, and then having the maturity and the wisdom to recognize when it isn't. And I think, you know, a big thing that I like what you've got going on with everything that you're doing, and particularly the Sorin X Outdoors, is you're giving people an opportunity to tap into that savagery, right? To explore it, to feel it, experience it, to challenge themselves, right? Because man, there are a few things I think out there that are more challenging than Mother Nature and the great outdoors. I mean, that is probably the pinnacle in my mind.
Yeah. It's because it's true, right? I mean, it doesn't care who you are or what you've done and all those things. It's like, it's going to be cold. It's going to be cold. Wet, you're going to be really screwed up, you know, and you better prepare and then sometimes just luck isn't with you, right? It's like, oh, this happened, you know, and I like that. I've always enjoyed that. Even as a kid, I enjoyed the truthfulness to that. And, you know, my dad would bring me in the woods and stuff like that, but it was always a process before. It was, what are you going to bring? What are your resources that you're bringing with you? And then you get to run the experiment. You get to go out there, and if you're wet and you're cold, he's like, oh, so you brought, you know, extra candy bars instead of a tarp. You're like, yeah. He's like, hey, you might want to think that one through. And you're wet as crap and you're miserable right now, and that's a great lesson.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff I love, and I so want for my kids, because experience is a really great teacher, you know, and
it's the best teacher.
Is a great teacher. Yeah. And you're just like, I remember sitting so many days in a deer stand, so wet and so cold by myself. And, you know, Dad says, I'll come back later. You don't know. You don't wear a watch. You don't know if that's in 10 minutes, 3 hours. You're like, I'm in this woods with a rifle. I guess I probably should be still. Yeah. Like, and I just remember like just praying, come back soon. I'm freezing my butt off, you know. And then but you're thinking, you have enough time to think like, all right, next time I'm bringing this, and I'm going to do this. This will not happen again, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that's just great.
I think that any time we can put ourselves in a position that elicits introspection, right, and self-reflection, that we also still can survive and make it out of. Because there's a point, right? We can reach a limit where like, oh man, I'm really rethinking my life decisions right now, and mistakes were made, right? That we don't get the chance to come back and tell those tales. So I think it's important that we, you know, keep that in mind. But we, you know, I don't think it's a bad thing to kind of bump up to that edge, whatever that line is, to kind of flirt with it a little bit. I'm not saying you jump over it. I'm not saying you just, you know, full send dive across it, but you know, you should occasionally maybe at least be able to see it in the distance. You know, maybe you can't smell it or taste it, but man, that line needs to still be somewhat present in our lives for us to be present in our lives, I think.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. You need that little dashboard flasher every once in a while. It goes, this is scary. And have you read Michael Easter's book? Oh gosh, I have it around here. Comfort Crisis.
No.
Comfort Crisis.
No, it sounds familiar. I think someone had mentioned that to me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically just how not only capability, but happiness generally stems from lack of comfort. And we always think as humans, we're like, make ourselves more comfortable, more comfortable. It's like, yeah, but that really kind of takes you down this path of really, you just kind of blah, life is just blah. There's, and so I would highly suggest one of the best books I've read in a while, but he talks about going on these, what they call misogi, and you very well may know what that is. It's like an elongated challenge that you go on. And like, number one rule is don't die. And number two rule is make it really hard, but don't die. Like you're sort of saying like, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. All right. Are you probably going to die? Because you need to have some safety mechanisms worked in. You want it to suck. Yeah. You have to like dig down, but dying for something that's just an interesting challenge that we can probably in a good plan.
Yep.
And so like he was talking about, and he does it himself, and I've done some, planning some. The idea is planning a challenge that you have a 50-50 chance of succeeding. So it's not like it's going to be kind of hard. Like, no, you're going to have to go there, or not. And it's not something that's a short duration. Like, I'm going to do a set of 5 in the squat. Like, well, you could hold your water for 20 seconds.
Sure.
Like something that's multiple hours, multiple days, like to give yourself a chance to go, this was a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And still have to push through it.
Yep.
One of the other things he talked about, which I found was very interesting, was you don't tell a lot of people. Because one thing you say, you put on social media, you're like, I'm going to run 25 miles. And then you have people that are going to pump you up, people that are maybe even going to offer you negative reinforcement that you could fight against in your mind. Like, yeah, screw that guy.
I'll show them.
It's like the purest form of it is if you know you're going to do it and you have to answer to yourself. So when it gets really hard and, there's one thing, it's like, yeah, but if I quit, I have to tell on social media that I quit. I better push on. Just like, man, I'm just decided to do this. If I quit, no one's ever going to know I quit but me. And then that's the test.
Yeah. That's
really,
that's super really cool. Cool. I mean, going back to the idea of comfort, again, like that's a valuable instinct to have, because if we didn't have the drive to be comfortable, the species wouldn't survive. We never would have started making fires. We just would have froze our asses to death.
Boy, is it cold. I know.
Oh, well, that sucks to suck. I guess I'm just going to lay down and, not wake up.
This raw meat's great.
So, the push, that internal drive is what has got us to this point. But I think we are now so comfortable, so entrenched in comfort. We're surrounded by it and so insulated that it's starting to have an adverse effect. And I think something like, this challenge that they're talking about is super necessary. I think we need to consistently create those in our lives so that we can have that reminder, and that comfort itself doesn't become the thing that kills us. They always talk about, I don't think I quit. I'm sure someone else said it first, this idea of like comfort kills, right? Yeah. And I wrote a blog article about it a while, where this idea of like, man, we just get in our little cocoons and, that's it. We don't grow. And I think once we stop growing, we go the other direction. And for you guys over at Sorinex, I mean, your mantra is to be legendary. You can't, in my mind, and maybe someone else has a better understanding or different understanding of the world, but you can't be legendary without doing something, right? And doing epic things. Right. I like the idea of not putting it out there for other people, though. I like the personal challenge, not having anyone to answer to for yourself, and then also not doing it for the glory. I mean, it's really easy. I think back to when I got into fighting, and in the early days, there was a big draw of it was like people knowing they're like, holy shit, this guy's badass. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. And as a young man, like, that's really cool. That's actually really important to your identity for people to know, like, that dude's a tough SOB. So there was that aspect of doing it for other people's validation. And as I got older and realized that that fuel didn't burn as long as some of the other stuff. You know what I mean? There's, you got the flash in the pan, right? And that can be useful, but like, man, you need a long burning source of something, to draw that energy from. And it's in that for other people, I think doing things for other people is fleeting. So that's a really cool thing. And so I guess you can't tell me. I mean, the first rule about it is you can't talk about it. Do you have something planned for yourself?
well, and another part of that was also that I believe he spoke about. It has to be something novel. So let's say you pick a marathon, 26.2 miles. That's not really novel because you could put that result against millions of other people's result. You can know, is a 4-hour marathon good? Is a 5-hour marathon? Is a 3-hour marathon good? He said, pick something that is so novel that you can't really have a good idea whether you're gonna be able to do it or not on the front end, because it's like, oh, well, I know this guy Phil and he did a 4-hour marathon. I'm like, it kind of is a shape, so I'm gonna try 4 hours. Like, and he talked about a guy, these 3 or 4 guys, they took like this 80-pound rock and their goal was to move it 5 kilometers down the beach underwater.
Oh shit.
And they were like between 6 and 10 feet of depth. And they went 5 kilometers underwater, taking turns. They would run across the bottom with this rock and they'd come up. The next guy would go under. And they did this for like almost a day. And they had, now the whole don't die part, they had like a rescue boat there with the medic. But that was like the only people that knew what they were doing. And you're like, well, I did 6 kilometers. Like, no, you didn't. Like, it's so novel. No one else would have done that.
Yeah, there's nothing to grade it against. To be like, oh man, we just set the world record, or
you just know it's really hard, and you're going to go do it, or you're just going to quit.
I think not knowing what you're getting into completely is really important, that sense of the unknown, because if we know the potential outcome, it eliminates a big portion of that fear factor, which I think is actually valuable, because this is a contrived event. You created this thing. You didn't need to do it. You just generated this out of thin air, right? To simulate and prepare you for something else that's unexpected. And that's what we're really going to encounter. So I think if we're going to be able to navigate those real life situations well, we need to have as many of these experiences under our belt as possible. And I think there's certain people that have probably, just by the way they have lived their life, have organically run into all of these challenges. And, for most of us, I think, going back to the not wanting to be a Viking, when it really comes down to it, I think we would mostly want to avoid those situations where, that the chance of not surviving is very real. Like, this is one of the reasons why I like professional fighting, because, okay, I know I'm not going to die in the cage. Like, the likelihood of someone killing me is really small.
Right.
There's a 50-50 chance I may lose. And there's a very good chance that I may get injured. There's a chance that I could get severely injured. But all in all, I'm not walking into a war zone. I'm walking into a cage with a referee and another opponent that knows the rule set, and we're going to have it out. So there's risk, but it's not too high. And I think that's the thing, is figuring out, okay, what can elicit enough risk to make it worthwhile, but isn't so over the top that, it makes the endeavor pointless. It's like, well, that was that.
Well, if you kind of knew the outcome
Game
on
over.
The front end, it's like, that's where like that neuroplasticity and like the dynamic thinking and your brain able to take in information and work with whatever I call it, like my wife and I talk about, well, whatever comes out of door number 2, we'll deal with. And it's like, that's kind of that thing. It's like the door number 2 is like, I don't know what's going to happen, but that's kind of the cool part about it. We don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And like, you'll see, I've done some work into like autistic children, some research into it. My son's on the spectrum a little bit. And one of the things is the the lack of dynamic thinking. Okay. So here's one of the things they did with him to kind of retune this. They call some of their primitive skills, or the primitive responses, like the Babinski reflex and different things like that. The people are just, well, the idea behind those is those train parts of the brain, right and left side, how to respond to the world around them. And once you get those responses set, and they're no longer, and they kind of go move past the response phase. That's how your building blocks of how you build your logic and how your brain works.
Okay.
For instance, if I walked behind you and I said, if I clapped my hands, That's the startle response,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. But if I said, all right, Josh, I'm about to clap my hands right now. It's gonna be very loud. And I clap my hands and you still startled. Well, you haven't worked through that primitive reflex yet.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain is still kind of caught there, like you're good. That's going to happen time and time again. You haven't had enough reps. That maybe most kids need 3 months of reps. Maybe you need 4 years of reps of that to get that through. And I said, well, what's the big deal with that? And that was one of the ones my son had.
Yeah.
I said, well, what was the big deal with that? They said, well, that is how the neuroplasticity and how his dynamic thinking would be based. They said where it would come up problematically when he's 16 years old and a girlfriend breaks up with him out of nowhere and he loses it because even things that happen that are unexpected, the inability to deal with them, take them stoically, take in information logically, work through it. The basis of it was the clap and the startle, and you're like, whoa, it was so interesting. We did this thing called brain balance, and it literally worked through all of these primitive skills until he's kind of worked them through. And then we're able to start building those building blocks on there. And I think that's something that probably more people are lacking than we would probably even think. Because you see people just lose their mind sometime, and you wonder, you're like, man, what primitive skill or primitive response is that person maybe just never fully developed?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, going back to living an insulated life, right? They probably never needed to. I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, a lot of the way that people are developing now in the world is very different than what we physiologically have been able to keep up with, right? The technology has increased exponentially, but we're an organism and it changes very slowly over time. And so we can't, our brains can't adapt, our bodies can't adapt, but we're thrust into this environment that's just changing so rapidly. And so, I'm sure that we all, in some degree or another, we have missed some developmental steps along the way. And we talk about this quite a bit for men. One of the things that is lacking in our society is that coming of age into manhood. Like, we don't have that collective agreed upon moment where you did this thing and now, okay, everyone knows and recognizes, like, all right, he's got the feather, he's got, you know what I mean, this piece of clothing or this tattoo or whatever the thing is, to say that, okay, we recognize you, we see you. And so without that, think about how many guys are out there just walking around with a chip on their shoulder because they themselves don't know. They haven't received that acknowledgement. They haven't given it to themselves and they haven't gotten it as well. And I think that is a huge misstep in our society nowadays. I think culturally it's a big, it's a big glaring weakness.
I think it's the biggest. I think it's the absolute biggest detriment that men and women are both facing and carry with them right now. It's that big wound and that big hole that they don't, a man, says, am I good enough? That's the thing. Am I good enough? Have I gotten the recognition from my tribe that I'm good enough to be a part of this tribe? And women generally, their hole and their question is, do you see me?
Yeah.
Am I desirable? Am I attractive? Am I someone that you'll pursue? And
am I someone worth defending?
Am I someone worth defending? Am I someone worth, giving it all up for? All that stuff. And you look at, the tales of since the dawn of time, they really ran off of those two themes. And when you start bastardizing the human existence and what our requirements are within society too far, and you start really kind of allowing kids to pass, without having kind of pass the grade without having to do those things.
Yep, just move them to the next one. Yeah.
Move them to the next one, move to the next one. Then you get these 30-year-old men and 30-year-old women that are totally lost in life because those really basic primal answers have not been answered. And they'll look from every other method to figure out if, and that's men going out and have the toxic masculinity stuff and going out and do all this stuff. They're wondering it. Well, okay. It's like, watched a special years and years and years ago. It was in Africa, and they had, it was like a big preserve, I guess it was.
Mm-hmm.
And they were moving some elephants around, and they moved one of these old bulls out of the herd and moved it to another place, blah, 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 whatever. They started finding these dead animals everywhere. So they started finding dead rhinos, dead zebras, like all these big animals. Like, what the heck is killing these rhinos,
Yeah.
They find out that there's these adolescent bulls are basically just trampling stuff. They're chasing people, they're smashing stuff, they're messing. And they figured it out. Like, it's like a bunch of teenagers. They're pumped up on testosterone, and the big patriarchal bull was taken out of the herd. So the young ones didn't have anyone to look up to, no one to be afraid of, and they didn't know how to be bulls. They didn't know what they needed to do to be a bull elephant. They're just like, I'm big and strong. And they just
do stuff.
Stuff, And you looking like, man, how beautiful of a interpretation and representation is that of society. Like, for strong men and strong women are wildly important. Otherwise, you're all dressed up like big, strong, testosterone filled bull that
isn't super useful and is actually
super useful,
is actually damaging. Yeah.
Detrimental to the society around them. Yeah.
I think that's a great metaphor. And I think sadly, there are few places where, there are a lot of good dudes to look up to. I think they no longer reside in the places where we used to look for those people. Right. You used to be able to see them in traditional leadership roles and all these other facets. And now when you start looking around, you're like, man, it's hard to find, it's hard to go across the list of House representatives and be like, oh yeah, no, I definitely want my kid to grow up like that person. Right. You know what I mean? And I'm beating up on politicians because it's easy to do, and a lot of them deserve it. There are some there are some super squared away individuals there, but sadly they're far and few between. We used to look to, we used to look to mythical heroes, right? That was where we got our sense of right and wrong and aspiration. And, our heroes, I think, have been killed and have been eliminated, or they've been watered down, or they've been transmutated in a way,
cartoonized and
to become more accessible. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's not to be confused with inclusive. That's different. But this idea of like accessibility is like, hey man, let's look, Hercules, too strong, too buffed, too jacked. Let's go ahead. Let's water him down. Let's make him, this so that kids, don't have to aspire to like be this thing. And I'm not saying that that's the only example. And I don't even know that that's.
They forget that Hercules killed like lions and bears and bulls with his bare hands. Like,
which he wouldn't be able to do, right. If he couldn't bench press his own body weight.
If he wasn't extraordinary.
Right. And so, this idea of like greatness and excellence being bad, like, no, look, we can't talk about being exceptional because, well, it might hurt somebody's feelings. And what if they can't? And it's like, man, no, that's the problem. Mm-hmm. It's not that we want people to feel bad about who they are and what they're doing, but we need to have stellar examples that exist in the world to aspire to. And if we sweep those under the rug, or we cancel them, or we do whatever, society seemingly wants to do to them nowadays, the problem is only going to get worse.
You lower the bar enough and the bar is going to be on the floor.
And I'd say it's pretty close.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's shocking how incapable the majority, not even Americans, just
humans.
Just humans in general. It's shocking. And I'm not even talking physical capability. Like, oh, I could chop down a tree and like, fine. Like that stuff is just, that stuff is so far off from the normal population.
Sure.
But even the ability to carry on a conversation, listen to one another and be curious and candid in your communication with one another, to be able to hold your cool while you hear something that's maybe controversial or different than you think, to show each other respect. Like, those should be kind of major tenets of the human existence, but they seem extremely rare these days.
They do. I will add, and maybe your experience is different, and I'm nothing if not optimistic.
Right.
And so I will say that the large majority of actual humans that I encounter face to face, and maybe it's because the bar has been set pretty low, but actually are decent human beings that can do those things. There's exceptions, and sometimes you run into some weirdo that, you know, can't like look you in the eyes or do whatever their thing is, or can't have a conversation without losing their mind. But I think that the information age has really skewed our perception. And so when you see people flying off the handle on social media and online, we tend to say, well, this is, man, I just read through 150,000 Twitter comments, you know what I mean, of people just going ballistic over this thing. Like, well, there's no hope for humanity.
Well, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I probably need to not overgeneralize like that, because really, most people I hang out with are, pretty.
Maybe that's wrong, because we are hang out with
cool people,
right?
Yeah.
So it is hard to say. I don't know. I want to believe that, the cool people that you and I encounter are hopefully a good, in some way resemble the general population. But judging by a lot of the stuff that's going on, I do have to believe that they are somewhat of a dying breed. And that's why I think it's important for us and everyone to have some of these real, genuine conversations and talk about some real shit, not just the fluff, or, what's on Netflix, or, this celebrity doing that thing, or whatever other bullshit that most people, I'm sure I'm going to catch some flack for this, but it's like, hey man, I don't really give a shit the score of the game in the grand scheme of things. The fact that they won or lost or did this or did that, like, that's cool. And I'm stoked about it, go team, sports ball. But like, there's more, if that's it, if that's where the conversation stops, if that is the pinnacle of your experience of life, it might be worth looking into some other avenues is my thing.
I 100% agree. And, and we work in the sports world. I've been in the sports world forever. I love it. I love parts of it, but the end game and the score is really kind of, I hate to say, is kind of inconsequential for me. Like, I'm not going to revolve my day around the decisions that 18 through 22-year-olds make on a Saturday. Like
go Dogs.
I love if they're after it and they're excited and I got to ride that ride. It's a great ride. I hope they enjoy that ride, but I rode that ride. I'm not riding.
I don't need to do it again.
I don't need to do it again. I'm super pumped that they get to do it. I support them. I love it. I love when we maybe make some things that I know makes them stronger and more fit and more capable. And like, then I have a dog in the fight. Like, hey, I had a little teeny little shred of your success, and now we're in this together.
Dude, it has to feel pretty cool when you see pictures of like NCAA championship teams, and then you see Sorin X in their weight room. Like,
pretty cool.
That's pretty dope.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. And it's been neat. Like the last few years, it's like almost every year, either a national championship team or a world championship team for a while now has been one of our customers. And so like, those are the guys I'm pumped about. People are like, who's your favorite team?
Well, you've got a horse in that race to speak of.
Yeah. Because I know the coach, and we sit down and we talk about strategy, and we talk about what to do with these kids. And I start knowing some of the kids, and like, I know what the coach is going through, and I know he's going through at home, and I know That's the fun stuff. That's the humanity of it.
Yeah.
What the score says at the end of the game, like, whatever, cool.
Yeah.
But
I think
the human nature of it's the best part.
Yeah. And so when you recognize and you look at it, and I think it's easy to, when you see athletes on a field, forget that they're like I mean, then these are kids, actually, not only that they're just regular dudes, but these are kids, man. And they're extraordinary athletes, and they're full of talent, but trying to derive our own self-worth and existence from their performance, I think is really like a bad path to walk down. I mean, look, I'm not going to tell anyone how to live their life, but if you were asking me for advice, I would say maybe take a step back. I mean, appreciate what they're doing and the talent and the skill to get there, and enjoy it for them, because man, that 18-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid, whatever, just scored a touchdown in the biggest game of his life. And man, that should be celebrated. That's a really cool experience. And we as a society should be like, man, you did something that very few people, will ever get a glimpse of. And I think that there's value in that. We're celebrating like peak human performance, but man, don't let it ruin your freaking day.
No,
if he drops the ball in the end zone.
Yeah. And I'm glad that kid is going to have a hard day when he's 43 years old, and he's going to maybe be able to think back to that 30 seconds of an amazing time he had at 22. And that hopefully will get him through that day and go, man, that was cool. Maybe that question, am I good enough? Maybe that helped him answer that.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I care about. And so that we were a small part of that is great. But, I'll be honest, like someone told me long, long ago, they said, I'm not willing nor interested in being a background player in someone else's movie. And I took that to heart, and I went, okay, this is my X number of years I have on this earth. This is my movie. Yeah. This is my adventure of what I want to do with it. My adventure does not derive off of someone else's adventure. Yeah. And so my adventure and my Saturdays, I'm pumped from the teams that I like and the guys I like, and I watch them, support them. My Saturdays are chasing my adventure, because I realize one day I'll be unable to. If you want to be a part of my adventure, come along. If you don't, I hope you don't. I hope you go do your adventure, because that's your life. It's your thing to do. And hopefully we can help you be stronger, more capable to do your adventure. But pick up the sword and start swinging, because it's later than you think. Right? Yeah.
No, man, that is all too true. I think far too many people live their lives like an NPC. And I don't know if you're much of a gamer. And for our nerdier listeners, and I will include myself in there, NPC is a non-player character. So you have a video game where you have your guy and you have him go do stuff, and then they have programmed in other avatars that you interact with and you talk to and you get quests from, and they give you things. But they only exist when that player comes up and talks to them. They don't do their own thing. They're not playing their own game. There's not a real person attached to that. It's a non-player character. And I think too many people are okay with living their lives as such, where they're not actually leading their own adventure. They are just existing, and they interact with people when they come up to them. They're watching the main character go off in the distance to go slay the dragon, and they're just sitting in front of their shop. And when he comes back, maybe they'll sell him, some new armor or whatever. Right. But that's those experiences are very different. That's a very different experience. And I think, we've kind of come to an age where too many people are just content with being NPCs and watching other people have these adventures, and no, that's good enough. And I use adventure as a catch-all term. Not everyone's adventures are going to be the same. Your adventure will differ from my adventure, and there's guys who, my adventure is like, a relaxing Sunday morning to them. You know what I mean? Like my me on my most epic day is some dude, hungover rolling out of bed and just, going through the motions. Right.
Right.
And that's perfectly fine. It really doesn't matter what your adventure is, as long as you're having it, as long as you are,
Yes.
lifting that bar up and moving it in a positive direction, right? Leveling that thing up and not just being content to have it lay on the floor.
Yeah. And there's some unknown, and there's some risk,
mm-hmm.
and there's some effort, and there's that's an adventure, that it doesn't have to be Denali.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to.
It could be.
Has to be. It could be.
But it could be. It could be the mountain. It could be the hike, to the top of the hill back behind your house that you haven't ever explored, and that's your first
having
time.
Kids.
Geez, yeah. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, the adventure of that's terrifying. It's still the hardest thing I've ever done, and you're like, I signed up for this 3 times. Am I crazy? But that was the adventure, right? And that's where it's like, live. Mm-hmm. Do this thing,
Yeah. You mentioned something when we talked earlier, and I wanted to touch on it because I thought it was really cool. This idea of, man, making sure you're going out and living the life that you want to live. I think it's really easy to get caught in a particular role. Like we were talking about, I was asking about the business and how that was going. And then, you had mentioned that it was going well, but you're also making time to go out and do the things that you love and not getting so wrapped up in chasing this one thing that everything else falls to the wayside. And I thought that was really interesting, because I think a lot of people can get caught in that trap of following success, but not living, the result.
Right.
You're not even enjoying the fruits of that success necessarily.
That's a really good way to put it. And some people love the process and love the ride and the adventure of the work so much. And I enjoy it, but there's also other things that I realize the fruits mm-hmm. are good to trade for as well, and I want to enjoy the fruits, because I've kind of joked, I was like, well, if it's going to be this much stress, if I'm not going to go do fun stuff, then I'm going to go get a job for a lot less money, a lot less responsibility. And when at 5 o'clock, when I'm off, I will not think about it until the next day. But much, I'm tied to this white whale at this point, day or night, wake or, and so if that's the case, I'm going to make it worth it on the clock and off the clock. And yep. It's going to be a tool to better my life while I'm having the adventure of the business. And then if it offers me additional abilities to do things, to go and adventure and explore other parts of this world in this little meat suit that I'm wearing.
Yep.
Then cool. Like that's otherwise why put up all the stress?
Yeah, no. And that's, and more specifically, the conversation was running the business and then getting out and going to do hunting, and
right.
Making sure, because you said you realized, you're like, oh man, holy crap, I need to go out and do the thing. Like the thing that I actually live for and experience my life. Like I've been so focused, and I think we do that. I know I've done it time and time again. And man, sometimes you forget to come up for air.
Right. You forget to love, to what's your passion? I always ask people, like, first things, like, what's your passion? Well, like movies. That's not your passion unless you're a movie maker. Like,
right.
Well, like pizza. Yeah. Like a
passion about
like,
coffee, bro.
About? Right. And if that's like, I think people need to find what is their passion, and they don't necessarily have to make that their vocation. But if they're passionate about something, those are the people I want to be around, because I know they at least care. They'll put the pedal to the metal down on something.
Yeah.
They'll put all their chips in on something. And those are people are fun to be around.
Because they challenge you to do the same. And I think, that competitive side of us, you know what I mean? It's like, I would be lying if I didn't say that, you and a lot of other guys didn't have a heavy influence in me picking up the struggle stick, watching you guys going out and slinging arrows. And I'm like, man, that's pretty badass. These guys are cool. That's something I feel like I should probably have. And if I want to get to hang out with those dudes, I probably need to be able to speak the same language to some degree. Man. You know what I mean? And it's like that. And I think that's important.
Yeah. Well, it goes backwards too. Cause like I hear you talking about doing a recurve bow, and like I've been shooting I used to shoot recurve, and I've been shooting compound bows. So those are the wheels and the pulleys,
Yep,
and the whole
yep.
deal for those people who aren't tracking at home. But you know, now I'm like, man, just getting into recurve. I should pick up my recurve. I've never killed anything with that. Like, I need to start, like, I'm a better hunter than I used to be. Maybe I could do that. And like, now, right now I'm doing the math. I'm like figuring out places I could sit right now. I'm like, I could do that. I bet that would work. But thank you for revitalized about that. That's great.
I'm honored. I mean, it's cool. And this is I think how real friendships and relationships in the world should work. And especially amongst men, which is really hard. I think guys have a hard time making friends, where we should be able to challenge and inspire each other, not in like, oh man, I'm going to get a bigger buck than Bert this year. But like, you know, or I'm going to see if I'm going to out front squat.
Right.
Or like,
right, whatever. Right.
But I think, you know, it's good to have that reminder of like, man, these dudes just like squatted all last month, and next month they're going to freaking be doing some deadlifts. Shit, I should probably pick up something heavy because I haven't done that in a while. Like that's really useful. Not that we live our lives again to try and impress other people, but man, we should surround ourselves with folks that inspire us and that are going to motivate us and challenge us to be more and do more. I think that's the only way we can, you know, ever hope to achieve that legendary status, as it were.
That's it, man. And that's the part about a tribe and building your people around you, and you go after your own adventure. And part of the adventure for me is helping others on their adventure and creating, you know, whether it's inspiration or maybe that's opportunity or a resource or things like that. Like, you know, I'm thinking now, I'm like, all right, the first one of us kills a squirrel with a recurve bow. You better shoot a text back and forth. And
100%. Oh,
and I was like, all right, I got to get out and do that.
Listen, the day that I bag a squirrel with my recurve, it is going all over social media. It is going to be like, people are like, this dude is so weird. Like, what is
a squirrel?
Freaking squirrel hunter thing? And like, I'm already planning, like, I'm going to make some kind of wardrobe. I don't know. I'm going to make like a leather vest out of squirrels or something. It's going to be,
hey, you know what? You can make a sheath for that sweet knife you have. Just a little squirrel. Like, you can hollow out a squirrel basically. That would I'll probably get in trouble for do PETA people listen to this podcast?
I don't think so. I mean, generally speaking, I like to tell anyone that is of that, because sometimes people are like, oh man, do you guys have any like vegan friendly products? And I'm like, well, the cows were vegan that we made the leather. So it's vegan leather made from vegan cows.
Vegan deer.
Yeah, vegan. I mean, they vegan. All eat plant. I have yet to see a cow, at least not that we make stuff out of, that has eaten meat. So he's a vegan. Right? That's how that works.
I love it.
No, we don't get beat up on that too much. Yeah.
I got some fun DMs today that was like, I don't know why people would say things like that, but I don't know. I'm sure people all give this kind of crap. I was just like, wow, that's really spicy. Interesting.
Yeah, people get, well, you know, it kind of goes back to, listen, I the surefire way to know, the last podcast, I made the joke that basically anyone who gets on our social media unsolicited and just starts talking trash, then it has something to do with their penis size and the lack thereof. It's like, well, clearly this is what it is. But and while I don't think that that's actually true in terms of a blanket statement, like I can't judge what you're packing based off of your comments, but what I can tell definitively, if you are someone who is that miserable with your life that you're just going to like jump into someone's DM and leave them a comment because you didn't like what they said, you are not someone who has accomplished anything worthy of recognition. And you're trying to get that attention in some other way. I have yet to see a single person that I look up to that has done things that are like, man, that's really freaking impressive. That is a huge accomplishment. I've never seen anyone that's accomplished things like that behave that way. And I don't suspect that I ever will. Think about any dude that you look up to who has done rad shit. They don't do that. So I know by default, when you behave that way, oh, you've never done anything meaningful with your life. no
Pretty
wonder you're
much.
behaving this way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're all those guys are always future focused. Like, what's the next ridge top? Like, what's the thing? And then, yeah, you see people that either want to be successful, or they start hating the successful people so much that they want to bring them down just so they could have some sort of relevance. You remember the movie Young Guns 2,
Mm-hmm.
when Billy the Kid, he was hanging out with Pat Garrett and they're best friends, and then at the end of it, he goes like Garrett's about to shoot him, and Emilio Estevez tells him that it's Billy the Kid. He goes, "Hey, just realize you'll never be Billy the Kid. You'll only be the guy that shot him." And just kind of like that last little thing, like, you're going to shoot me in the back as I turn around, and that's the best you'll ever be.
Yeah.
You know, and I think of that when I see people online that just chatter with that little like rat stuff. It's like, man,
yep.
Go out and do your thing, man.
Like,
Don't
please, by all means. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like literally, could you imagine where the world would be if you could take all of that wasted energy and like, I don't know, like put it towards something productive. Like I'm almost positive we could have cured cancer like 10 years ago if we could direct that somewhere. Like the amount of human achievement we could actually reach if people stop doing bullshit like that. And you know, I think they're really, I don't know what else to do. Like, you can't change people's minds. I think the best thing we can do is just hope to, you know, have conversations, talk. You know, my goal is to maybe that gets under somebody's skin a little bit. And they're, you know, I hope that there's someone that's listening to that. I like to think that all of our listeners are like, you know, they would never be that kind of person, but you know, maybe they accidentally stumble across this podcast.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, fuck, that was me. I literally just did this to so-and-so the next day. Maybe I should listen to Bert and John. No, that's not going to happen. Maybe I should do what they,
I mean, all of us made mistakes like that. I mean, all of us have done petty, dumb crap.
Oh,
all of us
for sure.
I mean, but hopefully we could all learn.
The goal is to learn.
I'll do something stupid later today. Once we hang up, I'll do something absolutely idiotic that'll make someone that guy's a dick. And I'm like, shit, sorry.
I fuck up all the time. I mean, I just told you I crushed my phone this past weekend in the hatch of my wife's Explorer. I went to shut it and it didn't shut all the way. And I was like, oh, something's in the way. So I shut it harder. and then I was like, that was a weird sound for whatever would, you know, maybe what might have been blocking it. That'll show it. So then I opened it up and just my screen was crunched. I was like, shit. But so that's made communications a little bit tricky. So for anyone who's been trying to call us for customer service or whatever else you might be trying to get a hold of, I have a legitimate reason why I haven't gotten to that email or whatever. It's because I'm an idiot and I break shit. So I'm sorry.
I'm just an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I think there's a lot of, there's so many things now. My mind is spinning and other topics I want to get into, but I know you're a super busy man. You probably got some squirrels to hunt. I know I do. They're just calling me.
They don't know what's coming today.
No, they super don't. They are in big trouble. I think maybe another episode at some point. I'd love to have you back on and, you know,
I'd be honored.
Sync up and chat some more. Cause there's so much to talk about with a cool guy like you. What are some places, you know, that people can, we mentioned Sorin Outdoors. What are some other areas that people want to reach out to you? They want to follow you. They want to get some of the best equipment stuff on planet Earth. Where can they find all that?
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I'd love to come back on the show at any time, and I'd love to have you on our podcast, on the podcast. That'd be great. I got a whiteboard right here. So they could check me out on Bert Sorin, BertSorin, on Insta. I'm on Facebook a little bit. I'm not on Twitter. Never looked at. I have no idea what TikTok is. I try to keep it that way. And Sorin on IG. There's Sorin Squattober, Sorin Outdoors, and Sorin There'll be Deadcember. So as for Deadcember, it's of 30 days of deadlifting. We program it for everyone. It's free. You just log in to Sorin Squattober on IG, and it's the world's largest deadlift party. So we had tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in 100,000 for sure in Squattober, but tons and tons of people all over the world would be deadlifting. And just a community event to get everyone doing hard stuff, kind of like a Misogi. You're gonna do it for 30 days. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be kind of strange, and most people quit.
Yeah,
so
that's
it'll change a life.
Man, is there a way to sync on pick a day? I don't care what day it is, right? But one day in December, everyone syncs their watches, right? And minimum, you got to get 3 wheels on the bar. Everyone stands up, and then when the clock strikes whatever, everyone drops it as a whole time, and just see, like, do you think we could feel that? See it shake the whole fucking world.
I love that.
How like is there someone that would be tracking like the seismology or whatever? Like, would that show up?
That's really, really interesting.
I mean, I know it's kind of silly, but it's actually kind of cool. Someone has to do the math and be super smart to figure out, all the different time zones and, whatever. But man, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people just like, boom, dropping it at the same time. That'd be super cool. That'd be a dope way to ring in the new year, actually. Man. Can you imagine if you did it at midnight on December 31st? I wonder if it
would like shift. What is like it shifts like the axis of the world and
oh shit. Oh no.
You're like, well, we had a pretty good run at it, and freaking Josh had this asinine
idiot. Yeah, he just ruined the whole world. It just dropped all your weight.
Knocked the axis.
Guys, you're sitting in there. He's like, don't do it. Like, this is
no, not the deadlift idea.
Yeah, dude, that releases the Kraken or like Cthulhu or something. Yeah, who knows what it could do.
That's
oh man.
All right, guys, in the comments on this, do we need to do this or not?
Yeah, should we do it or not? What do you think? Let us know. Like and subscribe. I'm so bad about that. I never do that shit, and I probably should, but I'm just like, man, if you like our stuff, watch it. If you don't, then that's cool too. Like, I don't feel like I need to twist anybody's arm to be a part of the things. Like, do cool shit, and hopefully when people see it, they'll appreciate it. And if not, fuck them.
Or if you don't like what you see, then maybe we should do a better job.
No. It's not me. That's them. No. Absolutely not. How dare you suggest that I need to work harder at something? That is preposterous, sir. The audacity. Man, this has been a ton of fun, dude. Really, really appreciate it. And please, Bert, are you in the League of Savage Gentlemen? Did I send you an invite to that? I know you don't do a lot with Facebook.
I don't know, but I would like if you would.
Okay, I'll make sure that I did. I thought I've seen you in there a couple of times. I'll double check to make sure.
Maybe early on. Maybe I need to dig back into it.
Yeah.
But tell me if I am and make sure.
Okay. It just popped in my head when you mentioned you didn't do much Facebook, but you are on Facebook. I was like, well, he's on Facebook. We need to make sure he's in the league. Yeah. So
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and then if people like have some questions, you can, they're like, hey, you got, that would be if someone's like, oh man, trying to do this, December and
trying to knock the world off its
axis.
I got an idea.
Yeah.
Josh had an idea how to do
it. they could ping it there, and instead of me trying to message you and then send it back to him, you could answer him directly. But yeah, make sure you guys follow this guy. He's doing awesome stuff all around. In and beyond the fitness world, in and outside of the hunting community. Just really cool stuff, man. And like I said, thanks, appreciate it, and look forward to talking soon.
That sounds great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, have a good one.